The plate hit the floor at 7:23 in the evening, not because it fell, because he pushed it. She stood in her own kitchen, one hand pressed to her burning cheek, the other hand flat against her pregnant belly, and she said nothing. She reheated his dinner. She set it back on the table. She sat across from him and watched him eat. That was Tuesday. By Saturday, he had found the letter. By the following week, he was already calling it our money. What Derek Whitfield never knew, what he could not have imagined in 6 years of marriage, was that the quiet woman across the table, the one who kept his dinner warm and washed the dishes by hand so the noise wouldn't bother him, controlled a private fortune worth $200 million. And she had a plan. She had always had a plan. Stay with us. Because the moment he finds out the truth, you will want to see his face. Lesson statement. This story is a reminder that the most powerful person in the room is not always the loudest one. Sometimes the woman who says the least has already decided everything. Meaning/value to audience. If you have ever made yourself smaller to keep the peace, if you have ever explained away something that hurt you, if you have ever known, deep down, that you deserved better and talked yourself out of believing it, this story is for you. Claire's journey is not just about money or revenge. It is about remembering who you were before you started shrinking. It is about the moment you stop surviving and start choosing. That moment is possible for anyone. If this story moved you, if even one moment felt familiar, felt true, felt like something you needed to hear today, let us know in the comments below. Tell us which moment hit hardest. Tell us what you would have done. And if you believe someone else needs to hear this story, share it with them. No explanation needed. Just send it. They'll understand why. If you're new here, subscribe and stay close. We tell stories about women who find their way back to themselves. There are more coming. You won't want to miss them.
The plate hit the marble floor at 7:23 in the evening. It didn't break. That was the thing about good ceramic. It slid from the edge of the counter where Derek had pushed it, skidded across the kitchen floor, and came to rest against the base of the refrigerator. The rosemary chicken scattered. The garlic mashed potatoes spread in a slow, creamy arc across the white tile. Claire did not move for 4 seconds. Her left hand was pressed against her cheek. Her right hand was flat against her belly. The baby had gone still, the way the baby sometimes did when something loud happened. Claire stood in her kitchen at 7:23 on a Tuesday evening and waited for the world to come back into focus. Derek was already walking toward the refrigerator. He stepped over the plate without looking at it. He opened the door and took out a beer. He twisted the cap off and set it on the counter. 2 inches to the left of the coaster, the way he always did. And he said, without turning around, "You knew I'd had a hard day." Claire said nothing. The Hendricks account fell through. I told you about that this morning. He turned around now. He looked at her hand on her cheek, and something moved across his face. Not regret, not exactly. Something more like recalibration. You were late with dinner. I came home hungry and the food was cold. It was warm, Claire said. Her voice was very even. She had practiced this voice for years without knowing she was practicing it. I kept it warm in the oven. It wasn't warm enough. She nodded once. She moved to the floor and picked up the plate. The chicken went back onto it. She carried it to the sink, scraped it into the trash, and stood with her back to him for a moment. The baby kicked. Once, then again. She breathed. She reheated the remaining chicken in the microwave for 90 seconds. She remade his plate. She set it on the table with fresh silverware and a clean napkin. She sat across from him and did not eat. Derek ate while scrolling his phone. He finished the beer. He started a second one. At some point, he said the chicken was good, actually, and she said thank you, and the kitchen clock ticked, and outside a car passed with its music. Up. And that was Tuesday evening in the Whitfield house on Larchmont Drive. This is how it went. Not with sirens, not with shattering glass and screaming neighbors, with reheated chicken and a second beer and a clock that ticked. Claire Whitfield was 7 months pregnant. Her ankles had been swollen since Thursday. Her lower back had ached for 2 weeks without stopping. She had spent 40 minutes that evening making Derek's favorite meal, the rosemary chicken, with herbs from the pot on the back porch, the garlic mashed potatoes exactly the way his mother had shown her, the table set with the good cloth napkins because Derek always felt better when the house was in order. She had put the chicken on the table at 6:58. Derek had walked through the front door at 7:22, 24 minutes. That was the distance between dinner being ready and Derek being home. 24 minutes during which Claire had sat at the kitchen table and checked her phone twice and looked at the front door 6 times and finally given up and moved the plate to the oven on warm. She was not supposed to be late. She understood that now, in the same bone-deep way she understood 100 other rules she had learned without anyone writing them down. After dinner, she washed the dishes by hand. The dishwasher was 18 inches to her left. It was a good dishwasher, stainless steel interior, quiet cycle. They had picked it out together 3 years ago at the appliance showroom on Route 9. She never used it when Derek was watching television. The noise bothered him. She was halfway through the roasting pan when she stopped. She stood at the sink with her hands in the soapy warm water, and she looked at them. Her hands, red from the heat, slightly pruned at the fingertips. She looked at them the way you look at something you've owned for years and suddenly can't place. When did I start doing that? Not a question. A landing. The kind of thought that arrives fully formed and sets itself down and doesn't leave. She finished the dishes. She dried her hands. She turned off the kitchen light. Derek was asleep on the couch by 9. He always fell asleep on the couch and moved to bed around midnight. Claire had stopped waiting up for him sometime in year 2 of their marriage. She went upstairs. She changed into her sleep shirt, one of her father's old flannel ones, soft from years of washing, faded blue. She sat on the edge of the bed and picked up her phone. She scrolled without reading. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She picked it up again. She opened the contacts, scrolled to a name, Warren Ashby. She pressed call. It rang twice. Warren always answered on the second ring, even at 9 in the evening, even when he was presumably doing something else, because that was Warren. He had answered on the second ring when she called to tell him her father was in the hospital. He had answered on the second ring when she called from the parking lot of the grocery store 6 months into her marriage and said nothing for 10 seconds before hanging up. Claire, he said. It happened again, she said. A pause. Not surprise. Warren Ashby had not been surprised by anything in 38 years of family law. Are you and the baby all right? Yes, we're fine. Another pause. Are you ready? She looked at the bedroom door. She could hear the television downstairs. A sports recap. Derek's voice, low, talking to himself the way he did when a team he'd bet on was losing. She hung up without answering. She lay down. She put her hand on her belly. The baby shifted. A slow, underwater roll that she felt from her hip to her ribs. She closed her eyes. Not much longer, baby, she whispered. Just breath, barely sound. I promise. She was asleep before Derek came upstairs. But before sleep, in the strange, suspended space between waking and under, a memory came, not a dream. A memory, 7 years ago. A different version of Claire Whitfield. No, a different version of Claire Hargrove, which was who she had been before, standing at a floor-to-ceiling window in a corner office on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Hartford. Outside the window, across the street, carved in stone, above the entrance of a 12-story building, Hargrove. She was 24 years old in this memory. She was laughing. She had her father's hands. Her father was behind her, saying something about the fourth quarter projections. And she was laughing because he'd made a joke that wasn't that funny, but was the kind of joke that her father made, dry and precise, and she found them hilarious because she had inherited his sense of humor along with his hands. $212 million. Growing quietly every single day in trusts she controlled completely. Derek did not know, and tonight, lying in the dark with her hand on her belly and her cheeks still faintly warm where his palm had landed, Claire Whitfield, Claire Hargrove, thought about that building across the street with her name on it, and thought about the key on her keychain that didn't match any door in this house, and thought about Warren's question. Are you ready? The baby kicked twice, insistent, certain. She breathed. The voicemail notification came at 8:47 in the morning. Claire was sitting in her car in the parking lot of Dr. Merritt's office. Engine off. Coat still buttoned. She had left the house at 8:15 while Derek was in the shower. She had not left a note. She had not told him about the appointment. She had stopped telling him about the appointments in month 4, when he had come once and spent 40 minutes on his phone in the waiting room, and then complained in the car on the way home that the parking structure charged $12 for under an hour. She looked at the notification. Bet Calloway. Voice memo, 42 seconds. She played it. Bet's voice came through the speaker, careful in the way it got when Bet was exercising discipline. Bet was a woman of strong opinions delivered at full volume, and when she modulated herself, it was audible. Like watching someone hold a door closed against wind. Hey, just checking in. Call me when you can. I have stuff. You have stuff. We have stuff. Also, I made that lemon cake you like. Just so you know, that's on the table. Figuratively and literally, actually, it's on my kitchen table. Okay, call me. Claire sat with the phone in her lap. Across the parking lot, a woman got out of a silver sedan. She was very pregnant. 8 months, maybe, farther along than Claire. She was laughing into her phone, one hand on her belly, walking with that particular rolling stride of late pregnancy, unhurried and certain. She looked up and caught Claire's eye and smiled the way pregnant women sometimes smile at each other. An acknowledgement, a small sisterhood of the enormous and uncomfortable. Claire smiled back. The woman went inside. Claire sat for 4 more minutes. Then she got out of the car. She had met Derek Whitfield at a gallery opening in October, 6 years ago. The gallery was showing work by a photographer Claire had followed for years. And Claire had come alone, which she did often, because she preferred experiencing art without having to negotiate someone else's reaction to it. Derek was there with 2 colleagues from his property development firm. He was 30 years old, broad-shouldered, with dark hair worn slightly long, and a quality of attention that she would later understand was the thing she had confused for depth. He looked at things carefully. He looked at her carefully. He said, "You've been standing in front of that photograph for 12 minutes. She had said, "I know." He had said, "You're beautiful," and meant it in a way that was so straightforward it was almost startling. No performance to it, just observation, stated plainly. She was 25 years old and had spent the previous 2 years being extremely careful about who she let get close to her. Not because she was shy, because she was rich. Not publicly rich. That was the particular art of it. Philip Hargrove had built Hargrove Capital over 40 years. Private equity and real estate holdings across 11 states with an institutional reputation that kept the name off the Forbes lists he could have been on if he'd wanted the attention. He did not want the attention. He wanted the results. He died when Claire was 3 years into her marriage to Derek. He left her everything. $212 million, held in irrevocable trusts, managed by Diane Cho at Ashby and Partners, under Warren Ashby's oversight. Every quarter, statements arrived at the P.O. box Claire had maintained since she was 22. Every year, decisions were made. The money moved, grew, worked. Derek did not know. Derek knew there was family money. She had allowed him to assume the version wealthy people assume about other wealthy people when the evidence is subtle. A good name, quality things, a mother who wore real pearls without calling attention to them. Old money, the kind that had thinned. A nice background, not much substance left. She had driven a sensible car. She wore clothes that were excellent but not conspicuous. She had never once corrected his assumption. Her father had taught her early, the people who want your money will tell you they love you first, and some of them will believe it themselves. That's the dangerous kind. She had thought she was being smart. Inside Dr. Merritt's office, Gesundheim, the examination was routine, and then not routine. Dr. Susan Merritt was 45, efficient, direct in a way Claire appreciated. She had been Claire's obstetrician since month 2 of the pregnancy, and she had a quality that Claire recognized in Warren and in her father, the quality of someone who asked one precise question instead of 10 vague ones. Everything with the baby was fine. Growth on track, position good, heartbeat strong, 148 beats per minute. Steady as a clock. Then Dr. Merritt asked her to sit up and shone a small light at her face and said very quietly, with the door closed, "Claire, your cheek." The bruise was mostly gone, 4 days in a good concealer, barely visible. A woman who wasn't looking for it would have missed it. Dr. Merritt was looking for it. "I bumped into the cabinet," Claire said. "In the kitchen, the corner of the upper cabinet. I wasn't paying attention." Dr. Merritt held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then she wrote something in the chart. She took a card from her coat pocket. Not a pamphlet, not a brochure, just a plain white card with a phone number. And she set it on the exam table beside Claire's hand. "That's a resource," she said. "Not if you need it. Just, that's a resource. Your next appointment is in 2 weeks. Call me before then if anything changes." Claire put the card in her purse without looking at it. In the car, she called Bet back. Betty answered on the first ring, which meant she had been watching her phone. "Hey, how are you doing? Like, actually doing?" The question landed with its specific weight. Actually, the word bet always inserted. "I'm good," Claire said. "Just tired. Baby's great. Good. That's good." A pause. "Claire, I know. I'm not going to push. I just want you to know that I know. I know you know." "Okay." Bet's voice settled. "Lemon cake is still available. I'll come Thursday." She hung up. She sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. She did not start the car. Outside the windshield, the sky was the particular flat white of November in Connecticut, and the bare trees along the lot's edge looked like they were waiting for something. She thought about what she had said to Bet. "I'm good, just tired." She thought about how automatic that was, how she had not decided to say it, how it had just come, the way breathing came. She thought about the card in her purse. She thought about Warren's question. She started the car. She drove home. Derek's car was in the driveway. He was home early. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. One complete breath in, one complete breath out. She looked at the front door of the house, the red door she had chosen, a detail she'd been proud of at the time, a small thing that felt like her own. She reached into the back seat for the grocery bags. She straightened her posture. She walked to the front door. Inside, on the kitchen counter, was an envelope. It had been opened. It was addressed to Claire Hargrove Whitfield from Hargrove Capital Trust, care of Ashby and Partners. Derek was at the kitchen table. He had the letter in his hands. He looked up when she came in. His expression was the controlled one. The careful, reasonable, temperature-managed version that was always more frightening than the loud one. Hargrove Capital, he said. He set the letter down very precisely. Isn't that your father's company? Claire set the grocery bags on the counter. She took off her coat. Sit down, Derek said. Let's talk about this. The refrigerator hummed. Derek was at the kitchen table with the open letter in front of him and his hands flat on either side of it, like a man who had found a map and was deciding how to read it. He had his reasonable voice on. Claire knew this voice the way a sailor knows weather. She sat across from him. How much money are we talking about? He asked. Some assets, she said. My father structured things through the trust before he died. Warren manages it. Warren Ashby. Yes. Your father's lawyer. Derek nodded slowly. Not at her. At some internal calculation. And you never mentioned this because it didn't seem relevant to our day-to-day. She watched his face. She was always watching his face, tracking the small muscular movements, the way a navigator tracks stars. The slight tension around his jaw, the evenness of his breathing, the way his right hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the letter and then stopped. He was not angry yet. He was calculating. Angry Derek breaks things. Calculating Derek plans things. We've been married 6 years, Claire. He said her name like a period. 6 years. And you're telling me there's a trust. There are assets, your father's company, and this somehow never came up. You knew my family had money. I knew your family had a name. His voice stayed level. I didn't know about... He picked up the letter. Ongoing asset management and quarterly distribution reporting. He set it down. That's not family money. That's a business. It's an estate trust. Warren handles everything. He reached across the table. He covered her hand with his. He squeezed. Slightly. Precisely. Not hard enough to leave anything, just enough to be unmistakable. We're partners, he said, smiling. Partners don't keep things from each other. She looked at his hand on hers. There it is. Of course, she said. You're right. What followed was 40 minutes of the most precise performance of her marriage. Derek asked questions. He was good at this. The patient, reasonable accumulation of information that looked like conversation but was actually excavation. What trust? What assets? Who managed the day-to-day? What kind of real estate? Was the firm still operating, or was it being wound down? Claire answered carefully. She gave him shapes, without dimensions. Yes, there was a trust. Yes, Warren Ashby managed it. Yes, there were real estate holdings and some equity positions. Nothing major, honestly. Her father had been conservative. She had never really been involved, didn't know the specifics. Warren handled everything. She was sure it was fine. She watched him build a map in his head with insufficient coordinates. She watched him decide the map was incomplete. She watched him decide to get better coordinates. She understood, in the cold observational part of her mind, exactly what was happening. She also understood that she had been protecting herself from the wrong thing for 6 years. That night, while Derek watched his sports recap and she stood at the sink, the memories came, not in order, in the way memory actually works, in shards and flashes, arriving by association, each one landing with the particular ache of something you recognize only in retrospect. The second month of their marriage, Derek saying, "It makes sense for household expenses to run through my account. Easier. I make more. Cleaner." And her thinking, "That's reasonable. That is genuinely reasonable." And moving her contribution to a monthly transfer into his checking account like a tenant paying rent to live in her own life. Month 8. Her talking about going back to work. She had been consulting occasionally, kept it vague, never mentioned Hargrove Capital. And Derek saying, "Why would you want that stress? We don't need it. Focus on us. Focus on making a home." And her thinking, "He wants to take care of me. That's love. That's what love looks like." Year 2, the lease on Larchmont Drive. She had suggested they both sign. He had said it was cleaner, with just one name, legally. Less complicated if anything needed to change, standard practice in his industry. She had let him sign alone. She had let him sign alone. He was building a cage, and I kept helping him decorate it. She dried her hands on the kitchen towel. She folded it precisely. She turned off the kitchen light. Derek's voice from the living room. "What time is your appointment Thursday?" 10, she said. "Don't schedule anything for Thursday evening. Greta's flying in." The kitchen towel was still in her hands. She set it down very carefully on the counter. "Greta is coming this weekend?" "She called this afternoon. She wants to see the baby before it comes." He said it like it was reasonable, like it was a given, like Greta announcing a visit 2 days in advance was a normal thing that happened in normal families. She booked the flight already. Claire looked at the towel on the counter. At the corner of it that wasn't quite aligned, she straightened it. "Okay," she said. Upstairs, Derek asleep. She drew a bath. The bathroom was the one room in the house that was completely hers. She had chosen the tiles. Small white hexagons with a thin gray border. She had chosen the fixtures. She had chosen the small framed botanical prints on the wall. 3 of them. Ferns she had found at an estate sale in Farmington 3 years ago. The room smelled like the eucalyptus oil she kept in a small brown bottle on the corner of the tub ledge. She got into the bath with her leggings and sleep shirt still on. She did not do this for any dramatic reason. She did it because sometimes the weight of everything was exactly the temperature of bathwater, and the only thing that helped was being held nearby it. She sat very still. The baby moved, a slow, deliberate shift, like someone turning over in sleep. She put her hand on the curve of her belly and breathed in. Eucalyptus, warm water. The faint smell of the rosemary from dinner still in her hair. She reached for her phone from the bath ledge. She opened the password-protected folder. It had a 6-digit code Derek did not know. Inside, quarterly statements from Diane, property records, trust documents, a copy of her father's will, and at the top, time stamped 3 months ago, a 47-page document with the header, Proposed Separation Agreement, Whitfield. Draft 7. Warren had been drafting it for 8 months. They were on version 7. Every revision was slightly more precise, slightly more protective, and Warren never asked why she hadn't used it yet. She read the summary page. She had read it approximately 400 times. The language had the particular beauty of something built to protect. Specific, airtight, Philip Hargrove's fingerprints all over the architecture of it, even though he had been dead for 3 years when Warren wrote the first draft. Her finger hovered over the button that would send it to Warren's secure inbox. She did not press it. Not tonight. She closed the folder. She opened her contacts. She pressed Warren's name. He answered on the second ring. "Warren," she said, "Greta Whitfield is coming this weekend." Derek found a letter from the trust this afternoon. He's starting to build a picture. "I know," Warren said. He always seemed to know, or at least never seemed surprised. Are you ready to move? She listened to the bathwater settling around her. The baby kicked once, solid, certain. Schedule a meeting, she said. This week, all of us. Thursday morning. Yes. It's about time, Claire. She set the phone back on the ledge. She leaned her head against the tile. She closed her eyes. Above her, the botanical prints. Ferns, green and still. Thursday, she thought. Thursday. Greta Whitfield's perfume arrived before she did. It was a heavy floral, dirty, gardenia, and something powdery underneath. The kind of scent that embedded itself in upholstery and fabric and stayed there long after its wear had gone. Claire could smell it from the top of the stairs when Derek opened the front door Friday evening. She stood at the landing with her hand on the banister and breathed through her nose and told herself it was only the weekend. Only the weekend. Greta was 61, slim, dressed in the particular way of women who equate presentation with character, everything pressed, everything coordinated, everything indicating that she had given serious consideration to the impression she was about to make. She hugged Derek the way she always hugged Derek, long, full, as if absence itself was an injury being healed. She looked at Claire over Derek's shoulder. She smiled. Claire, you're enormous. Thank you, Greta, Claire said. The weekend began. By Saturday morning, Greta had reorganized Claire's kitchen. Not the whole kitchen, just the spice cabinet and the lower pantry shelf, and the arrangement of pots above the stove. She did this the way she did many things, without asking, while describing the improvements as obvious, in a voice that made any objection seem like a personality defect. Claire made coffee. She made enough for 3. The nursery color, Greta said over her mug, at the kitchen table, addressing Derek but looking at Claire. It's that green. What's it called? Sage, Claire said. Is sage safe for an infant? The paint is 0VOC. I saw something about certain shades affecting sleep. I can send you the study I read, Claire said. It didn't find any correlation. Greta looked at her, a look that said, I am being patient with you. I'm just saying, for the baby. Of course, Claire said. For the baby. Saturday lunch was pleasant. Saturday afternoon was pleasant. Claire had become, over 5 years, a person of extraordinary surface pleasantness in Greta's presence. She answered questions. She declined to engage with provocations. She offered Derek's mother tea and then coffee and then a glass of water and understood that each offering was a small deposit in a bank she would never actually own. She was too tired for it this weekend. She didn't explode. She didn't argue. She simply ran out of the energy to maintain the performance at full wattage. And the performance dimmed slightly, and Greta noticed and filed it somewhere. Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock, Claire went upstairs to rest. She did not rest. She lay on the bed with her eyes open and her phone on her chest and thought about Thursday morning, about Warren's office, about version 7 of the separation agreement, and then she heard them. She wasn't eavesdropping. She had come to the top of the stairs to ask about dinner, just that, just a practical question about whether they wanted to go out or eat in. And she heard Derek's voice from the living room below, and then Greta's voice answering, and the particular tone of both of them told her to stop. Derek, she should have told me, before the wedding, after the wedding, at some point in 6 years of marriage, she should have told me. It changes things. Greta, what things? Everything. If there's real money there, and I think there is, I think it's significant, then everything needs to be looked at differently. Our arrangements, the house, what we're building together. A pause. Then Greta's voice, and it was a voice Claire had genuinely never heard from her, careful, measured, and unexpectedly direct. Derek, be careful. That kind of money doesn't belong to you. Whatever she has from her father, that's hers. Don't do something stupid. Silence. I'm just saying we should have transparency. No, Greta said. You're saying you feel entitled to something you weren't told about. Those are different things. And I'm telling you, as someone who has watched men make this mistake, be careful. Claire stood at the top of the stairs with her hand over her mouth. Greta Whitfield just defended me. She went back to the bedroom. She lay down. She stared at the ceiling. She filed it. Greta was not an ally. But somewhere inside, the woman who had reorganized her spice cabinet and suggested sage was unsafe for infants, there was a line she apparently would not cross. That was information. Saturday dinner was a masterpiece of collective performance. Greta was warm, Derek was attentive and charming in the particular way he became when he needed something, full of small gestures, compliments about the meal, hand on Claire's back when Greta was watching. Claire served and smiled and redirected conversations and managed the temperature of the room the way she had been doing for years. Underneath the table, her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from something new, from the fact that she had heard Derek in his own voice saying it changes things, from the fact that the map he was building in his head was nearing completion, from the fact that she had a meeting with Warren in 4 days and draft 7 of the separation agreement in a password-protected folder on her phone. At minute 37 of the chapter of her life called Greta's Visit, something inside Claire quietly and irrevocably shifted. It was not dramatic. It looked like nothing from the outside. She was at the kitchen counter, sliding the dessert plates onto the counter for stacking, and Derek made a comment to Greta. A throwaway line about how Claire had been a bit scattered lately. You know how pregnancy gets. And they both laughed. That specific laugh of two people sharing an understanding at a third person's expense. And Claire set the dessert plate down on the counter with 2 hands scattered. I manage a $200 million portfolio in parking lots and 5-minute windows on my phone. I have grown a human being for 7 months. I have protected both of us from a man who hits me when dinner is late, and I have done all of this while being a good guest in my own life, scattered. She dried her hands on the kitchen towel. She went back to the table. She sat down. She smiled at the story Greta was telling. But something had changed axis, something that was never going to change back. Sunday morning, 6:45. Claire was standing in the doorway of the nursery. She had woken at 6 and couldn't get back to sleep, which was normal in late pregnancy, and she had walked down the hall and stopped at the nursery door the way she sometimes did. Just looking, the room was half finished. White walls, the crib still in its flat-pack box in the corner. The mobile she had ordered 3 weeks ago, little white stars on thin silver wire. Hanging from a hook, she'd asked the handyman to put in the ceiling, turning very slightly in the air from the vent below. She stood there looking at the turning stars and thinking about nothing in particular, which was a luxury she had been taking in stolen moments all weekend. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Greta was standing in the hallway in a dressing gown, her silver hair down, looking slightly startled by the early hour. They looked at each other in the quiet of early morning, the half-finished nursery, the turning mobile, the flat November light just beginning at the window. "You haven't put the crib together yet," Greta said. "No." They stood there for a moment. Greta looked at the room with an expression Claire couldn't quite categorize, something almost soft. "You're stronger than he knows," Greta said. "Not You're doing a wonderful job. Not everything is going to be fine. Just that." Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen to make coffee and never acknowledged she had said it. Claire stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time after that. Sunday afternoon, Greta left. Derek drove her to the airport. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, he closed the front door and stood with his back to it. Claire was in the kitchen. She heard him breathing. Then he turned around. He was holding his phone up. On the screen, a Google search. Hargrove Capital, estimated value. An article from a financial publication, 6 years old, citing a press release from before her father restructured the holdings. The number on the screen was $430 million. That was the old number. Before restructuring, before the assets were moved into the trust structure, before Philip Hargrove, with Warren Ashby's assistance, had deliberately made the public number smaller and the real number larger and the whole arrangement invisible. But Derek didn't know that. He was looking at $430 million and looking at his wife. "Want to try this conversation again?" he said. The Doppler monitor beeped with steady, unhurried rhythm. 146 beats per minute. 147. 146 again. Claire lay in the triage bay at Mercy General with a blood pressure cuff on her left arm and a fetal monitor strapped across her belly, and a nurse named Ruth who had the particular quality of kind efficiency, doing 3 things at once while making each individual thing feel like her full attention. "Little elevated," Ruth said, reading the blood pressure display. 138/91. We'll monitor for an hour and see if it comes down." "It will," Claire said. "Stress can cause this," Ruth said. She was adjusting the Doppler lead, not looking at Claire. "Is there anything at home we should know about?" Claire looked at the ceiling. The ceiling tiles had a pattern. She counted the small square perforations. 12 across, 14 down. "I'm fine," she said. "Just overwhelmed. Pregnancy things." Ruth nodded once, wrote something down, and went to get Dr. Merritt. The conversation with Derek on Sunday evening had not gone well. She would not narrate the whole of it, even to herself. Some things compressed in memory to their essential shape, which was the shape of what they cost. What it had cost, Sunday evening, was the pretense. She had sat across the kitchen table from her husband, holding his phone, with the $430 million number on the screen, and she had thought, "This is the last time I perform this." And something in her face must have shifted, because Derek's expression shifted in response, not to the calculation, but to something underneath it, something like the beginning of a question he hadn't thought to ask before. He had grabbed her wrist when she stood up from the table. Just a grab, not a strike. His hand around her wrist and pressure applied to keep her seated. "We're not done talking." And she had looked at his hand on her wrist and thought, with complete clarity, done. She had driven herself to the hospital. She had done this without deciding to. She had gotten in her car and driven, and ended up in the Mercy General parking lot, because the car knew where safe was, even when she hadn't said the word yet. She had called Bet on the way. She had not meant to. She had pressed Bet's name without entirely meaning to, and Bet had answered on the first ring, and Claire had said, "I'm at Mercy General. I'm fine. The baby is fine." And Bet had said, "Parking structure or street level?" Because that was Bet, not what happened. Not, "Are you sure you're fine?" Just, "Where do I go?" Bet was in the waiting room when Ruth came back to say visitors were allowed. She came into the triage bay carrying 2 coffees. One clearly labeled decaf in marker on the cup, because Bet had stopped at the hospital cafe and thought of that specifically, and she looked at Claire for 3 complete seconds. taking inventory in the particular way of a woman who had been best friends with this other woman for 11 years. She did not ask what happened. She sat in the plastic chair beside the bed, and she took Claire's hand, and she said, "Okay, what do you need?" Claire looked at her. She could not remember the last time someone had asked her that question and meant it with zero agenda. "I need to go," Claire said. "Not home, not anywhere specific. Just go." The concept of movement and ending, unnamed. Bete nodded. "Tell me what that means, and I'll help you make it happen." And something that had been held very tightly for a very long time, with enormous effort, in Claire Whitfield's chest, broke. Not broke the way things break in films, not sobs and collapse. Broke the way ice breaks in early spring. A sound like a crack, and then the slow separating of the surface into something that had always been underneath. She told Bet. Not everything. Not all at once. She told her about Tuesday evening. The plate on the floor, the reheated chicken, the hand on her cheek. She told her about the ache in her back that had been there for 2 weeks, and how at some point she had stopped noticing, whether it was from pregnancy or from the way she flinched whenever Derek came home. She told her about Sunday evening and the wrist and the word "done" that had arrived in her head fully formed. Bet listened. This was an act of genuine, extraordinary discipline from a woman who had strong opinions and a strong voice and had been, apparently, holding both of them back for 5 years. She did not interrupt. She did not make a single expression that could be read as "I knew it" or "I told you so." She just held Claire's hand and listened. "I'm scared," Claire said, the words arriving with the force of something finally named. "I'm scared, and I'm 8 months pregnant, and I've been planning to leave for 8 months, but I keep finding reasons to wait, and now he knows about the money. Not all of it, but enough. And I don't know if I can..." "If the timing is right." "The timing," Bet said, "is when you're ready. That's when the timing is right." "I called Warren. This week. We have a meeting Thursday." "Good. Betty." Claire looked at her. "Why didn't you say something earlier, years ago?" Bichet was quiet for a moment. Her jaw did something careful. "Because I knew you, and you were not going to hear it until you were ready. I could see it. I could see the signs. I chose to stay close instead of push, because pushing would have meant losing you. And losing you meant losing my ability to be there when you got ready." She paused. "I'm sorry it took this long. Don't be sorry. I'm saying it anyway." Ruth came in to check the blood pressure. 129/83, coming down. She adjusted the monitor and left. Bataille, still holding Claire's hand, looked at the phone on the tray table. The password-protected folder app was visible on the screen. Claire had been checking it without noticing. Bet looked at the app icon, looked at Claire, raised one eyebrow. Just one eyebrow. Not a word. Claire looked at the phone, at Bet. She took a breath that was nearly a laugh and opened the folder, found the separation agreement, stared at the send button. Betty did not say press it. She did not say anything. She just held the space. Claire closed the folder, opened her contacts. Warren Ashby, second ring. "Warren, it's Thursday morning or I come to the office tonight. Which works better for your team?" "Thursday morning," Warren said. 8 o'clock. All files ready." "Good." She hung up. The phone buzzed immediately. Derek. The text read, "I'm not angry. We need to talk like adults. I just want to understand our full financial picture before the baby comes." That's reasonable. Come home. The word "our" in our financial picture. She showed Bet. Bet, read it. Bet's jaw did the thing where it tightened, and she breathed through her nose very deliberately and said, pleasantly, Our, Claire agreed. Then Warren texted, a scanned document, image attached. She opened it. Her father's prenuptial agreement, drafted at Philip Hargrove's specific written instruction, before the wedding, reviewed by 3 separate attorneys, signed by both parties. She had signed it at 26 in a conference room, tired, trusting Warren, not reading carefully enough to understand its full scope. She was reading it now. Warren had highlighted one section in yellow. She read the summary. In the event of dissolution, all assets originating from Hargrove Capital Trust remain sole property of Claire Eleanor Hargrove Whitfield, regardless of marriage duration, length of cohabitation, or domestic contribution. Her father's handwritten note in the margin, scanned from the original. Make sure she can always leave. Make sure she always has somewhere to go. She stared at her father's handwriting, his particular slant, the P with its oversized loop, the way he wrote, always with a small emphasis, as if the word needed protecting. I have had the protection this entire time. I just forgot I was allowed to use it. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor at 7:59 Thursday morning. Warren Ashby's office occupied the northeast corner, which meant it had morning light. Real morning light, direct and gold, and Claire stood in the elevator doorway for a moment when the doors opened and felt it on her face. She had driven here from Bet's apartment, where she had spent the night on the guest bed with 6 pillows, and she had stopped at a coffee place on Asylum Avenue and gotten a decaf and drunk half of it in the car, and she had worn her good coat. The charcoal one, cashmere, the one her mother had given her for her 30th birthday. And she had done her hair the way she liked it, not the way that caused the least comment. She looked like herself. She had forgotten, briefly, what that felt like. Warren was at his office door when she stepped out of the elevator. 64, silver-haired, slight in the way of men who had always been lean, wearing a suit that was excellent without drawing attention to itself. He looked at her when she came down the corridor, looked at her face, specifically, and she saw him register the coat, the hair, the way she was walking. He said nothing about any of it. He stood back to let her into the office. "Sit down, Claire," he said. "Let's get you out of this." The office smelled like coffee and old books, and the particular neutrality of a room that had held 1,000 difficult conversations without absorbing the difficulty of any of them. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, a partner's desk with 2 clear surfaces, 3 chairs arranged at an angle that suggested consultation rather than confrontation. Diane was already there. Diane Chen, 42, who ran the day-to-day management of the Hargrove portfolio with a precision that her father had trusted completely. Claire had not seen Diane in person in 4 months. Diane stood, extending her hand, and said, "You look well." "I look like a person who slept at her friend's apartment," Claire said, "but thank you." They sat. The meeting was 2 hours. Not all of it belonged in this telling. There are sections of legal documentation that work as protection precisely because they are not dramatic, because they are exact and thorough and would bore anyone except the person they are designed to shield. What mattered was this. The prenuptial agreement was iron. Philip Hargrove had commissioned it from the finest family law attorney in Connecticut, and that attorney had built it with the specific paranoia of a man who had spent 40 years watching wealth destroy families, and had decided to spend the last years of his life ensuring that his daughter's wealth would only ever protect her, never expose her. The trust structure was clean. No marital asset claims could reach it. No community property arguments applied in their state. Derek's name appeared nowhere in any financial document related to Hargrove Capital. He had married into $212 million and had absolutely no legal claim to a single dollar of it. He'll challenge the prenup, Claire said. He's already consulted someone. He mentioned precedents on Sunday. He will, Warren agreed. And he'll lose. I've seen the arguments he'll try. None of them hold against this document's structure. Your father was thorough. He was thorough about everything. She paused. He was also infuriating about it sometimes. Yes, Warren said, and his expression softened for just a moment. He loved you very specifically. Warren's assistant, a young woman named April, came in during the meeting with a plate of shortbread cookies. The cookies were in a blue tin, a particular blue tin with a particular logo on the lid. The same tin that had sat on the corner of Philip Hargrove's desk for as long as Claire could remember. She stared at the tin. She did not mean to stare at it. She meant to take a cookie and continue the meeting. She started crying, not sobbing, not anything requiring tissue provision as an emergency measure. The quiet kind. The kind where your eyes fill and you blink and the tears go down your face and you sit there and let it happen because stopping it would take more energy than you have. Warren said nothing. He passed the box of tissues from the corner of his desk. He nodded at April, who left. He let Claire cry without calling attention to it, which was the precise right response, and she loved him for it. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. It's the cookies. He had the same. I know. I order them from the same place. Have for 30 years. He let her have a moment. Then, ready to continue, she took a cookie. She ate it. She breathed. Dad? You brilliant, impossible man. You knew. Warren then slid a manila folder across the desk. It had a tab label in his precise handwriting. Whitfield D. Investigative. Claire had commissioned this file 8 months ago. She had asked Warren to hire someone quietly. She had not told Derek. She had not told Bet. She had done it alone, in the same methodical way she made every other decision when she was operating from the Hargrove part of herself, with thoroughness and without sentiment. Inside, photographs, hotel receipts, a name, Monica Carr, 31, marketing coordinator at Whitfield Property Development, which was Derek's firm. Dates spanning 14 months. 14 months of a secret affair, running parallel to the pregnancy. How long have you had this? Claire asked. The core documentation came in about 6 weeks after you commissioned it, 7 months ago. I've been waiting for you to be ready. She looked at the photographs, a woman she didn't recognize in photographs, that told a story she absolutely recognized. She felt the information land, not with shattering impact, which might have been easier, but with a dull, specific weight, like something heavy being set down on a table that was already too full. He never loved me. He loved the idea of what I might have. And when he thought I had nothing, the affair filled the space. And when he found out I might have everything, the plan changed. She closed the folder, both hands flat on the cover. Okay, she said. Let's go. Warren looked at her over his reading glasses. The gala is Saturday, he said. Derek's company event. You were planning to attend? Yes. We can file before then. The serving will happen Monday. File Saturday afternoon, she said. Before the gala. I want it done before we walk in. Warren nodded once. He reached for a pen. The jazz quartet was playing something slow and certain, and the ballroom of the Hartford Marriott was full of the specific warmth of 100 people who were comfortable and successful and wanted everyone to know it. Derek's company, Whitfield Property Development, held their annual industry awards dinner every November. Claire had attended 3 of them. They were, she had always thought, a portrait of a particular kind of ambition, the kind that needed external confirmation, that required a room of peers and a podium and a plaque with a name on it to feel real. She understood ambition. She had been raised by it. But the Hargrove version of ambition was private. It showed up in results, not in events. She wore black. She had her hair done at 3, 2 hours before the gala. At a salon on Farmington Avenue, where the owner knew her and asked no questions and did good work. She wore small diamond earrings that had been her mother's. She wore the good coat over a dress that fit her at 7.5 months pregnant, like a dress that was designed for this. Draped well, structured right, chosen in October when she was already planning ahead. She looked like Claire Hargrove tonight, not Derek Whitfield's quiet pregnant wife, not the woman who washed dishes by hand to avoid bothering him, not the woman who reheated chicken and said thank you and put the card from the doctor in her purse without looking at it. She looked like the 14th floor. She looked like the building with her name on it. Derek was relieved she had come. She could read that relief in the way his posture shifted when she arrived at the hotel entrance. Something releasing, something recalibrating. He had been managing her carefully since Sunday evening, since the wrist. The careful version of Derek, present, attentive, touching the small of her back, complimenting her appearance in front of his colleagues. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, steering her toward the ballroom. "Thank you," she said. 17 minutes into the event, she saw Monica Carr. She knew the name from Warren's file. She knew the face from the photographs. She had thought she was prepared. She was mostly prepared. Monica was across the ballroom, near the bar, in a green wrap dress. She was 31 and attractive in the way Claire imagined she was. Bright eyes, good posture, the specific energy of someone who was trying to appear relaxed and was not entirely succeeding. She was talking to 2 women Claire didn't recognize. She was also, twice in the 14 minutes Claire watched her, glancing at Derek. The way you glanced at a man you were sleeping with when you were in the same room and not supposed to acknowledge it. The particular frequency of that specific look. Claire absorbed this information the way she had been absorbing information for 7 years, completely, accurately, without expression. She excused herself from the conversation she was in. Derek's boss, his wife, a discussion about a waterfront development project, and walked toward the restrooms. Monica followed within 90 seconds. Whether she had planned this or whether proximity and guilt had produced it, Claire didn't know and didn't particularly care. They stood in front of the mirrors, the 2 of them, in the low light of a hotel bathroom that smelled of expensive hand soap. Monica looked at her in the mirror. The sequence of emotions on her face was genuinely rapid. Recognition, guilt, something harder, defiance, possibly, or the performance of defiance as a substitute for courage. "You should know," Monica said, and her voice was steadier than her expression, "that Derek is planning to file for divorce. He's been talking to a lawyer for 2 weeks. He's planning to claim half of everything." Claire applied lip gloss. She watched Monica in the mirror while she did this. "He should look at the prenup first," she said. Monica blinked. "What prenup?" "Exactly," Claire said. She capped the lip gloss. She turned from the mirror. "Have a good evening." She walked back into the ballroom. Derek intercepted her near the dessert station, which was appropriate somehow. Derek always appeared near food, near the table, near the domestic spaces. He was holding a glass of wine, and his smile was the calculated one, the one that meant he had been thinking about this moment. "I spoke to someone," he said. His voice was low, conversational. They were standing 12 feet from his regional director, who was laughing at something with 2 other people. About the trust, about the prenup situation. I think you'll find there are legitimate questions about its validity given community property precedents in Derek, she said, very quietly, very pleasantly. She was still smiling. I want you to think carefully before you finish that sentence, because when you do, this becomes a different kind of evening. He finished the sentence. He said, I'm entitled to an equitable share of everything we built together, all of it, and I'm prepared to demonstrate that in court if I need to. She took out her phone. She opened the email application. She navigated to the sent folder. She turned the screen to face him. The email was time-stamped 4:17 p.m. Subject, Whitfield. Separation agreement, filed. Derek read the screen. His eyes moved left to right, and then back again, the way eyes do when they're encountering something they're trying to unencounter. You already... When... 4:17 this afternoon, she said. Warren's team filed it with the court. You'll be served Monday morning. The jazz quartet chose this moment, as if they had been briefed, to begin a new song, something confident and unhurried. Around them, the ballroom continued, glasses, laughter, awards being moved toward the podium at the front. Derek Whitfield stood very still. His face moved through things. The controlled anger, the calculating patience, the performance of reasonableness, all of it cycling through and finding nothing to land on, because the thing it had been reaching toward, the $212 million, the leverage, the long game, was gone. It had been gone the whole time. He had just not known where to look. And underneath all of those expressions, something Claire had genuinely never seen on his face before. Fear. Just fear. Plain clean, stripped of everything it had been hiding behind. She looked at it and felt, not satisfaction, not triumph, not the specific vindication she had imagined feeling in this moment when she had imagined this moment late at night at Bet's while reading the separation agreement for the 401st time. She felt tired and free and very hungry, which was a pregnancy thing, but also possibly a fundamental truth of the body thing. The lawyers will be in touch, she said, and walked away. She did not go back to find Derek. She made one circuit of the room, greeting people she knew, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, listening to 30 seconds of a conversation about a development project in Simsbury. And then she got her coat from the coat check, and she walked out. She had driven herself to the gala. She had planned this. She sat in her car in the hotel parking garage, not the driveway of Larchmont Drive, never that driveway again. A neutral, fluorescent-lit parking garage, with the sounds of other cars and distant music and her own breathing. She sat there for 3 minutes. The baby kicked, once, hard. I know, she thought. I know. She pressed her hand to her belly. The kick came again, slightly lower. She started the car. She drove to Bet's. She never went back to Larchmont Drive. The guest room at Bet's apartment had a window that faced east. This was not a detail Claire had ever noticed before, because she had always been a visitor here, sleeping late when she visited, missing the morning. But now, 4 days into living here, she knew that the window faced east, because the light came in at 6:45 every morning with a particular insistence that she had come to appreciate. She had been at Bet's for 4 days. She was safe. She had filed. The separation was formally initiated. The baby was healthy. Dr. Merritt had confirmed this in a phone call Wednesday, her voice carrying the specific professional warmth of someone who had been quietly worried and was now quietly relieved. Claire's blood pressure was down. She was also unable to sleep on her left side because of an ache in her hip that started somewhere around week 32 and had not improved. Crying in the shower every morning, Not for Derek specifically. That particular sorrow was simpler and smaller than she'd expected, and she was honest enough with herself to recognize that the simplicity was its own kind of grief. She was crying for the years, for the energy, for the specific loneliness of being in the wrong life and knowing it, and choosing, every single day, to explain it to herself as something else, making lists. She always made lists when she was processing. Bet had provided her with a yellow, legal pad and made no comment about the fact that Claire filled 4 pages of it on the first day. Bitta's apartment was small and loud with color. The kitchen walls were deep blue, the living room was full of houseplants and terracotta pots. The guest bed had a quilt that had belonged to Betty's grandmother and smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Every morning, without knocking, Betta left a coffee outside the guest room door. Decaf, in the same travel mug each time because Bet had washed it and filled it again, and this small repeated gesture was more sustaining than Claire knew how to say. On day 2, Claire called Diane. She had not called Diane directly in 7 months. She had responded to emails, reviewed statements, signed documents, but the actual work of Hargrove Capital, the living, thoughtful management of it, she had ceded to Diane's capable hands while she managed the work of surviving her marriage. She had done the minimum. She had been sleepwalking through the stewardship of everything her father had built. Anne answered in one ring. Claire, I want to talk about the portfolio, Claire said. Actually talk, not just review the quarterly. A pause. Then, with something like restrained satisfaction, I've been waiting for this call. They talked for 2 hours. Diane walked her through the current positions, the properties under management, the equity holdings, 3 potential acquisitions that had been sitting in a preliminary file waiting for direction. Claire asked questions. She made notes on the legal pad. She had opinions, specific, substantive opinions that arrived from somewhere she had not accessed in years, from the part of her that had sat in her father's office on the 14th floor and understood what he was building. I missed this. I forgot what it felt like to have a mind that was mine. She told Diane about one acquisition, a mixed-use development opportunity in the Colt Gateway District that she wanted to look at seriously. She told Diane about a philanthropic initiative she had been sketching in notebooks for 2 years, a maternal health access fund targeting underserved communities in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I want to fund it properly, Claire said. I've been thinking about the structure. I want to talk to Warren about the charitable vehicle. I'll set up the call, Diane said. Derek texted daily. She did not respond. Everything went through Warren now. This was protocol. Warren had explained it the way he explained everything, clearly, without drama, as a simple logistical fact. Derek's lawyer had formally appeared. He was challenging the prenup on 3 grounds: inadequate financial disclosure at the time of signing, duress, and community property contributions. Warren had responded to each argument with documents that dismantled them. On Wednesday, a call came from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She had been screening unknown numbers for a week, but something, instinct, or the particular way the phone had been buzzing, 2 short rings, and then again patient and deliberate, made her pick up. Is this Claire Whitfield? A woman's voice. Careful. Who is this? My name is Monica Carr. A beat. I think you know who I am. Claire sat very still. Outside Bet's living room window, a pigeon settled on the windowsill and regarded her briefly. I know who you are. Derek is using me, Monica said. I didn't know. I knew he was married, but I thought. She stopped. Started again. He told me the marriage was over, that you were just staying together for the baby. He told me, he said a lot of things, and now that his lawyer knows the prenup is solid, Derek told his lawyer that there was an improper workplace relationship, and that I'm part of the reason his professional reputation is being damaged. He's using me to create a different narrative. He threw you under the bus, Claire said. Yes. A flat, clear word. And you're calling me because... Because I have information. Monica's voice steadied. He talked about your money from the beginning. He knew you had family money. Not the real number, but he knew there was something there from the first year of your marriage. He talked about it. He said... She paused. He said it was a long game. The words landed in Claire's chest like stones dropped into water. Long game. I'm going to send you some screenshots, Monica said. Text messages between Derek and a friend of his from about 3 years ago. I had them because he used my phone once when his battery died. I kept them. I don't know why I kept them, but I kept them. The text chain arrived 90 seconds later. She read it. Derek to Todd Prentice. 3 years ago. 2 months after the wedding. She's got more than she's letting on. Family money. Real money. I can feel it. She hides it, but it's there. Long game, man. Long game, Todd. Bro, just be careful, Derek. Careful is how you lose. Patience is how you win. She sat with the phone in her hands for a long time. Betty came in from the kitchen, looked at her face, and sat down on the couch beside her without asking. Claire showed her the screen. Betty read it. Her jaw tightened. She breathed through her nose. She put her arm around Claire's shoulders, which required some geometric negotiation given the pregnancy, and she sat there. He decided, Claire said quietly, from the beginning. It was a decision. Yes. He looked at me and decided. Yes. Bet's arm tightened slightly, and you looked at him and decided to love someone. Those are not equivalent decisions. Don't make them equivalent. Claire sat with that. The baby moved, a slow, rolling shift. She put her hand on her belly. I called Diane, she said. Good. We talked about the portfolio, and I want to start a foundation, maternal health. Bet looked at her. Something that was almost a smile. Yeah? Yeah. Tell me about it. And in the small, bright living room of Betta's apartment, with the houseplants in their terracotta pots and the October light going gold outside the window, Claire Hargrove told her best friend about the foundation she was going to build, the one she had been sketching in notebooks for 2 years, the one that had been waiting, the one that had her father's kind of patience in it and her own kind of fire. The mediation suite on the 6th floor of Warren's building smelled like floor cleaner, and the particular neutrality of rooms designed for difficult conversations. Not a courtroom. Warren had always preferred mediation, controlled, private, outcomes determined by document rather than performance. Derek's attorney, a man named Graves, who had the aggressive bearing of someone who knew his position was weak and was compensating with volume, had agreed to mediation as a precondition to any litigation. This was, Warren had explained to Claire on the phone the night before, because Derek's lawyer was smart enough to have read the prenup and understood that going to trial would be expensive and would result in exactly the same outcome. Claire arrived at 8:50 with Warren. She wore a gray suit, bought 3 weeks ago, tailored for late pregnancy, the kind of thing her mother would have approved of. She carried a single folder. She had slept 7 hours the night before, which was the best sleep she had gotten in 2 months. She felt absolutely clear. Derek was already at the table when they came in. He was wearing the charcoal suit she had given him for his 35th birthday. She recognized it by the particular way the pocket square was folded. a habit of his she had never managed to correct. He looked like he had not slept well. He had a small cut on his chin from shaving, which meant his hands had been unsteady this morning. He looked up when she entered. She met his eyes. She held them for 2 seconds. Then she sat down. The session ran 3 hours. Graves presented the challenges to the prenup: inadequate disclosure, duress, community property contributions, and Warren disassembled each one with the quiet efficiency of someone for whom this was not a contest, but an accounting. He produced documentation for every counter. He produced correspondence. He produced, when Graves introduced the community property argument, a precise mathematical analysis of what Derek had actually contributed to the household against what Claire's management fees had generated in the same period. The numbers were not close. Claire spoke twice. The first time was procedural, confirming her intent to proceed with the separation under the prenuptial agreement's terms, her desire for an equitable joint custody framework for the child or children, and her lack of interest in any claims against Derek's personal assets. The second time was when Graves suggested, obliquely, that the timing of the separation filing, 2 hours before the gala, indicated a deliberate effort to humiliate Derek professionally and could speak to Claire's good faith. She looked at Derek, not at Graves, at Derek. "I filed at 4:17 in the afternoon," she said, "because I wanted it done before our child was born. I wanted the legal framework established before I brought a baby into the world, so that the baby's situation would be clear from the beginning. I chose the Saturday before the gala because it was the earliest Warren's team could process the filing that week. Everything after 4:17 that evening was your choice and your timing, not mine." Derek looked at his hands. It was the truest thing she had said to him in years. She could feel the truth of it in her own body, the way honesty, after a long drought of it, felt almost physical. During a break, she found the third-floor women's room, which she had identified earlier as the quiet one. She sat in the far stall and breathed. She was 8.5 months pregnant and had been sitting in a chair for 3 hours, and her back was objecting with some force. She took out her phone. She texted Bet. "I think it's going to be okay." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. Then a single emoji arrived, a small flame, yellow, precise, burning steadily. Claire laughed. In the bathroom stall of a mediation building, sitting on a closed toilet in a tailored pregnancy suit, she laughed. A real laugh, full and sudden and surprising, the kind that arrives from somewhere you didn't know was available. The baby kicked, hard, as if startled, and she put her hand on her belly and laughed again and said, I know. Sorry." When she came back into the mediation suite, Graves had spoken privately with Derek during the break. The recalibration was visible. Graves's shoulders had changed. Something had deflated slightly in his posture. He had advised Derek, probably, to read the room. Derek sat with the stillness of a man who had received information he didn't want and was incorporating it. Warren's manila folder sat on the table, unopened. It had been there all morning. It contained the investigative file, the hotel receipts, Monica's texts, the 3-year-old conversation with Todd Prentice about the long game. Neither Derek nor Graves had asked about it, but they both knew it was there. Warren had made certain they knew it was there. He had not opened it because he did not need to open it. Sometimes the most powerful information is the information you don't have to use. Graves requested a brief consultation. They stepped out. 15 minutes. When they returned, Graves said, "My client would like to proceed under the existing prenuptial agreement terms." Warren nodded once. He made a note. "You'll Claire signed 3 documents. Derek signed 3 documents. They did not look at each other while signing. When it was done, she walked out of the building with Warren beside her. The November air was cold and direct, a pale winter sun at an angle that put light directly in her face. She stopped on the sidewalk. She turned her face up to it. "Your father would have said that was the Hargrove in you," Warren said. She breathed the cold air in. He would have been insufferably pleased about being right. He was always insufferably pleased about being right. It was one of his better qualities. She smiled. Her phone rang. Dr. Merritt. "Claire?" Her doctor's voice had a specific quality. Careful, warm, slightly elevated. "How are you feeling right now? Are you sitting down? I'm standing outside a building. I just finished mediation. I'd like you to sit down." She sat on the building's front steps. Warren sat beside her, which she noted without asking him to. "Your last set of tests," Dr. Merritt said. "All of the results are excellent. You and the baby are completely healthy. I want you to know that first." "Okay. And secondly, I want you to know this because it changes your planning." A pause. "You're having twins, Claire. 2 heartbeats. We've been tracking them separately for the past 2 appointments. There was some positioning that made it difficult to confirm earlier. But today's imaging is unambiguous. A boy and a girl. Both healthy, both exactly where they should be." Claire sat on the cold stone steps of a building in Hartford, Connecticut, 8.5 months pregnant, on the day she had concluded the legal process of ending her marriage. She looked at Warren. Warren was looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately read. "Warren," she said. "Yes?" His voice was careful. "I'm having twins." Warren was silent for a moment. Then quietly, with the particular dignity of a man who had known her father for 40 years, Philip would have been beside himself. She pressed the phone back to her ear. "Dr. Merritt, are they okay? Both of them?" "Both of them are excellent, Claire. You're going to need to rest more, and we'll schedule more frequent monitoring. But both babies are healthy and strong." A pause. "Congratulations." She held the phone in her hands after hanging up. The winter sun on her face, Warren beside her, 2 heartbeats, a boy and a girl. She took one very large breath, and then another. Then she started laughing again. The same sudden, genuine kind, the kind that had arrived in the bathroom stall. And this time it kept going. And after a moment, Warren joined her, and they sat on the cold steps of a mediation building in Hartford and laughed until the people walking by started looking at them. Eleanor arrived first at 4:22 in the morning with the particular announcement of someone who had been waiting and was done with it. James came 6 minutes later, in his own time, at his own pace, which Claire later understood was simply his personality beginning. Eleanor Rose Hargrove Whitfield, 4 pounds, 14 ounces. James Philip Hargrove Whitfield, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, both healthy. Both exactly where they should be. The James was for her father. She didn't explain this to anyone who asked. The Philip was the explanation. Betty was in the waiting room during the delivery. She had arrived at the hospital 11 minutes after Claire called her, which meant she had been dressed and in her car and possibly already driving, which Claire chose not to question. When Dr. Merritt came out to say that both mother and babies were well, Bet sat down in the plastic chair, put her face in her hands, and stayed there for approximately 45 seconds. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and said, "Okay, let's go see them." Nora Hargrove arrived from Boston the following morning. She came by train, which she preferred, with a rolling bag that contained specific things. 2 sets of organic cotton infant clothes she had washed and pressed herself, 3 containers of soup she had made and frozen, a framed photograph of Philip holding a very small baby Claire, that had sat on Nora's nightstand for 31 years, and a small wrapped box that turned out to contain two identical gold bracelets, one for each baby, both engraved on the inside with the word Hargrove. She looked at Eleanor and James for a long time, without speaking. Then she said, with the precision of someone who had been saving the exact sentence for the right moment, "Your father would have adored them." Claire, in the hospital bed, holding both babies in the arrangement Dr. Merritt's nurse had shown her, nodded once. Her mother sat in the chair beside her and put her hand over Claire's hand, and they were quiet together for a while, which was the Hargrove way of saying the most important things. Betty moved into the new apartment for 3 weeks. The new apartment was on the 8th floor of a building on Asylum Hill, a corner unit with 2 exposures and more light than any room had a right to in November. Claire had chosen it specifically for the light. She had signed the lease 6 days after the mediation, 4 weeks before the babies arrived, because she had discovered that the act of choosing her own space with no negotiation, no management of someone else's reaction to her preferences, was one of the most clarifying things she had done in years. The walls were white. She had not yet decided what to put on them. She had bought furniture she actually liked, not furniture that caused the least friction. The nursery had a sage green wall. One sage green wall, 3 white ones, because she had read the study and she liked the color. Betty occupied the second bedroom with a cheerful efficiency that involved setting up a coffee station by 7 each morning and holding whichever baby seemed most alert while Claire slept. She was caught doing this twice. Standing at the living room window at 5 a.m., Eleanor in her arms, speaking quietly to her about various topics, including a recent work situation and a documentary she had watched, and her strongly held opinions about certain mutual friends. Both times, Betty declined to be embarrassed. "She's a good listener," she said. "Better than some people I know." Derek came for the first supervised visit when the twins were 11 days old. He had accepted the custody framework that Warren had proposed. Supervised visits for the first 6 months, then a graduated schedule as the children grew. Claire's attorney was present. The visit was 45 minutes. He held James for most of it. He sat in the armchair in the living room with James on his chest, and he was quiet in a way Claire had rarely seen from him. Not the controlled quiet, not the calculating quiet, but something simpler and more human. When he stood to leave, he handed James back to the night nurse Claire had hired for the first months. He put on his coat. He looked at Claire, not at the babies, and said, "I know I was wrong." Just that. No elaboration, no request for response or absolution. Just a statement, offered flatly, like something being returned to its rightful owner. Claire nodded once. "I'll see you at the next visit." He left. She closed the door. She stood in her own front hallway, in her own apartment with her own name on the lease, and her 2 babies in the next room, and her best friend in the kitchen, making the specific brand of tea that she liked, and nobody's preferences to manage but her own. Done, she thought. The same word that had arrived in the kitchen on Sunday evening 3 months ago. Then it had meant ending. Now it meant something else entirely. Now it meant complete. She called Diane the following week. She had been speaking to Diane regularly since the day she called from Bet's apartment. But this call was different. This call was, "I'm ready to run this properly." Diane said, "I've set aside 140 pages of materials for you. Send them. You'll want the first 20 pages first. They're about the opportunity in the Colt Gateway district." "I already read about it. I want to move on it." Another of those restrained, satisfied pauses. "Welcome back." Hargrove Capital had not stopped working in the years Claire had been surviving her marriage. The money had grown, the properties had been managed, the equity positions had performed. Diane had done excellent work without direction. But there is a difference between an institution running on good stewardship and an institution being led. And the leadership of Hargrove Capital had been absent, and now it was returning. And the thing that happened when Claire Hargrove turned her full attention to something was the thing her father had known about since she was old enough to sit at his conference table. She had her father's mind. She had been using it in parking lots and stolen 5-minute windows in the half space between managing her marriage and managing her survival. She had not yet used it the way it was built to be used. She began. The Maternal Health Asset Fund took shape through November and December. She had been sketching it in notebooks for 2 years, a program targeting the specific gap between insurance coverage and actual care access for pregnant and postpartum women in underserved communities in Connecticut and Massachusetts. She had data, she had research, she had the particular fury that came from being 8 months pregnant in a hospital triage bay, explaining to a nurse that yes, she was fine, she was just overwhelmed, when the truth was that she had a bruise on her face and a husband who had not once in 7 months asked how she was feeling. She had the fund structured by the second week of December. Warren helped with the charitable vehicle. Diane helped with the initial funding. The board of 3, Claire, a maternal health physician from Yale, and a policy specialist from Hartford, had their first meeting on a Tuesday morning in January when the twins were 6 weeks old and Eleanor had slept 4 hours in a row for the first time. The morning she went back to the Hargrove Capitol building for the first time, it was the second week of March. Early spring in Hartford, which meant the snow was mostly gone and the cold was the clarifying kind, and the particular clarity of it, the bare branches, the hard pale blue sky, the way the city looked like it had been cleared away to its essential elements, felt appropriate. Eleanor was in a carrier against her chest. James was in the stroller beside her. Bet was on her left with 2 coffees and the particular expression of someone who had dressed up slightly for an occasion she was pretending was casual. They stood on the sidewalk outside the building. Hargrove. Stone letters above the entrance. Her father's name. Her name, carved into the building's face 30 years ago by a man who had believed, with the particular Hargrove brand of quiet certainty, that it belonged there. Ready? Bet asked. Claire looked up at the letters. She looked at the door. She looked at Eleanor against her chest. The small, warm weight of her, the way she breathed in sleep, that steady, unhurried rhythm that had been running for 6 minutes in a hospital at 4:22 in the morning and had not stopped since. She thought about Sunday evenings on Larchmont Drive, about reheated chicken and dishes washed by hand and a key on her keychain that didn't match any door in a house she had never loved, about Warren's question, asked so many times on the second ring. Are you ready? She thought about the parking lot at Dr. Merritt's office and Bet's voicemail with the careful, restrained voice, and the photograph of a woman with her father's hands standing at a 14th floor window with Hargrove across the street. She thought about her father's note in the margin. Make sure she can always leave. Make sure she always has somewhere to go. She turned her face up to the March sky. I was always ready, she said. I just had to remember where I started. She walked in. The lobby was exactly as she remembered it. The stone floors, the particular light from the high windows, the reception desk where a young man looked up when the door opened. He recognized her name when she signed in. She could see it, the small recognition, the slight adjustment of his expression, and he said, "Welcome, Ms. Hargrove Whitfield. Mr. Ashby's assistant called ahead. They're expecting you on 14. 14th floor. She walked to the elevator. Bet folded the stroller. Eleanor slept against her chest. In the elevator, going up, Claire Hargrove looked at herself in the mirrored doors. She looked at the woman looking back, 31 years old, slightly tired in the way of new mothers. Her hair done the way she liked it. Her good coat, her father's earrings, 2 babies, one in the carrier and one in the stroller Betty was managing. A full calendar, beginning tomorrow. The Colt Gateway acquisition on the docket. The Maternal Health Fund's first grant cycle opening in April. The floor counter climbed. 7, 8, 9. She thought about the women she had been before this year. The careful one. The one who washed dishes by hand to avoid the noise. The one who had $212 million in a password-protected folder and lived like a woman who was afraid to take up space. She had not stopped being that woman all at once. She had stopped being that woman 1 degree at a time. In the bathtub with her leggings on, in Warren's office, eating shortbread and crying, in the restroom of a hotel ballroom, saying, "You should probably look at the prenup first," in a mediation suite, signing 3 documents with steady hands. She had stopped being that woman in stages, the way anyone stops being the wrong version of themselves, slowly, and then all at once, and then completely. 12, 13, 14. The elevator opened. Warren was at the door. He looked at her, at the carrier, at Eleanor, at Claire's face, and he smiled with the full warmth of a man who had been waiting for this day for a long time and was allowing himself to feel it. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, Warren." She walked past him into the 14th floor. The morning light came in from the northeast corner, the same light that had been coming in every morning for 30 years. The same light she had stood in at 24 years old with her father's laugh still in her ears. Outside the window, across the street, Hargrove. She sat down at the table. She opened her folder. She began. For anyone listening to this story right now, for anyone who has ever driven around the block 1 extra time because going inside felt impossible, for anyone who has ever picked up the phone and put it down and picked it up again and said, "I'm fine," when they weren't, for anyone who has been doing the math on leaving for longer than they want to admit. Here's what Claire Hargrove finally understood, sitting on the steps of a mediation building in the winter light. 2 heartbeats, moving inside her, everything she had carried for years finally set down. She had been confusing survival with living for a very long time. Surviving was white-knuckling the steering wheel and keeping dinner warm and washing the dishes by hand and making herself smaller and smaller until she fit the frame she had been given. It was competence without joy. It was safety without life. Living was choosing where you drove. The prison door had been unlocked the whole time. Her father had unlocked it before she even walked in. She had been her own warden, not because she was weak, but because she had been so occupied with protecting everyone from the truth that she had forgotten she was allowed to protect herself with it. The hardest moment was not the gala. It was not the mediation. It was not any of the confrontations or revelations or the morning she drove to the hospital because she had nowhere else to go. The hardest moment was the one in the kitchen with the dishes, looking at her own hands in the warm water and thinking, "When did I start doing that?" Because that was the moment she stopped pretending she didn't know. Everything after that was just logistics. Starting over feels impossible until you do it, and then one morning you are standing on a sidewalk in early March with a baby against your chest and your father's name above a door and your best friend beside you with 2 coffees, and someone asks if you're ready, and you realize the answer has been yes for longer than you knew. You were always ready. You just had to remember where you started. Closing disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you a story with meaning, depth, and a lesson worth carrying. All characters and events are fictional. Any resemblance to real people or situations reflects only the universality of certain human experiences. We tell these stories because we believe every woman deserves to see herself in a story where she wins.